Have you ever noticed that the people who constantly defend themselves are rarely the ones who command the most respect? The moment they are questioned, they rush to explain every decision, justify every action, and convince everyone that they are innocent. Ironically, the more they speak, the less believable they become. Meanwhile, somewhere in the same room stands another person. They hear the accusations, they see the doubtful looks, they understand the whispers spreading behind their back, yet they say almost nothing. They remain calm, they continue with their work. Days later, the noise fades, but their reputation remains untouched. This difference is not luck, it is strategy. Centuries before modern psychology gave names to emotional manipulation and social influence, Niccolò Machiavelli observed a simple truth about human nature. People often mistake explanations for weakness. They assume that someone desperate to defend themselves must have something to hide. Whether that assumption is fair or not does not matter. Human beings rarely respond to facts alone. They respond to confidence, emotion, and perception. That is why the person who remains composed during criticism often appears stronger than the person who delivers a perfect defense. Most people spend their lives believing that every misunderstanding deserves an explanation. They think every accusation requires a response. Every insult demands a comeback. Every rumor must be corrected before it spreads. But this instinct quietly places your emotional state into someone else's hands. The moment another person can provoke you into explaining yourself, they are no longer reacting to you. You are reacting to them. In that instant, they have already gained influence over your behavior. This is one of the oldest games of power. The manipulator does not always seek the truth. More often, they seek your reaction. They understand that once your emotions begin speaking, your judgment begins fading. Anger makes you reveal too much. Fear makes you justify too much. Pride makes you promise too much. Every unnecessary explanation becomes another piece of information placed into someone else's hands. Imagine a king sitting upon his throne while two advisors argue before him. One speaks endlessly, defending every decision with long speeches, complicated excuses, and emotional appeals. The other says very little. He answers only what is necessary, then quietly returns to his duties. Which one appears more confident? Which one seems more in control? The king may forget every word spoken by the first advisor, but he will remember the calm certainty of the second. Silence has a strange effect on the human mind. It creates mystery. It forces people to think instead of simply reacting. It denies your opponent the emotional victory they hoped to achieve. When you explain everything, you remove that mystery. You expose your fears. You reveal which accusations hurt you most. You unknowingly hand your opponent a map of your emotions. Machiavelli understood that power rarely belongs to the loudest voice in the room. It belongs to the person who controls themselves when everyone else loses control. Think about history's greatest rulers, generals, and negotiators. They did not survive because they always had the cleverest argument. They survived because they knew when speaking would strengthen their position and when silence would protect it. There is a reason experienced negotiators pause before answering difficult questions. There is a reason judges listen longer than they speak. There is a reason master chess players study the board quietly, while inexperienced players rush into the first move they see. Restraint is not hesitation, it is preparation. Silence is not weakness, it is discipline. Modern life has trained us to do the exact opposite. Social media encourages instant reactions. A stranger leaves an insulting comment, and within seconds people begin typing paragraphs in their defense. Someone questions your character, and you feel compelled to explain your entire life story to people who never intended to understand you in the first place. Every notification demands an immediate response. Every disagreement becomes a public performance. Yet the more available you become, the less valuable your words appear. Scarcity creates value, and this applies not only to money but also to attention. The person who speaks only when necessary naturally commands greater attention than the person who comments on everything. This is where dark psychology quietly enters the conversation. The skilled manipulator knows they do not need to defeat you with logic. They only need to make you emotionally uncomfortable. Once you begin explaining yourself, they have already achieved their objective. They watch your tone change. They notice your breathing become faster. They observe which topics make you defensive. Every sentence you offer becomes another clue about your insecurities. They are not listening to your explanation. They are studying your reactions. And without realizing it, you become the one revealing information while believing you are protecting yourself. Machiavelli would likely remind us that influence begins long before words are exchanged. It begins with emotional discipline. The strongest position is often the one that requires the fewest explanations. This does not mean becoming cold, dishonest, or indifferent. It means understanding that not every accusation deserves your energy, not every critic deserves your attention, and not every misunderstanding deserves correction. Sometimes the most powerful answer is to continue living in a way that makes the truth obvious over time. Reputation built through consistent action will always outlast reputation defended through endless words. The people who truly matter watch what you repeatedly do, not what you repeatedly say. And those determined to misunderstand you would simply twist your explanation into another weapon against you anyway. That is why the first lesson is also the hardest. Never let someone else's demand for an explanation become control over your emotions. The moment you master that, you begin playing a different game altogether, one that most people never even realize exists. In the next lesson, you'll discover the first of Machiavelli's 7 dark psychology tricks, why refusing to react can become your greatest psychological advantage. The first trick is deceptively simple, and that is precisely why it is so powerful. Never react immediately. Most people believe strength is demonstrated through quick responses. They think answering instantly proves confidence, intelligence, and control. In reality, immediate reactions are usually driven by emotion rather than judgment. Machiavelli understood that whoever controls the pace of a confrontation often controls its outcome. The person who reacts first usually reveals the most, while the person who waits gains the advantage of observation. Imagine standing in a crowded hall where someone suddenly insults you in front of everyone. Every eye turns toward your face, waiting for your response. Your heartbeat accelerates. Your mind races. Pride whispers that silence will make you look weak. Anger urges you to strike back before anyone mistakes your calm for fear. But what if that moment was carefully designed? What if the insult was never about the words themselves, but about forcing you to surrender your emotional balance? The manipulator understands something most people never realize. Emotion is contagious. If they can infect you with anger, embarrassment, or frustration, they no longer need to defeat you. You will begin defeating yourself. Think of a fisherman casting a hook into the water. He does not argue with the fish. He does not chase it across the lake. He simply waits for the fish to bite. The insult, the accusation, the disrespectful comment, these are all hooks. Every emotional reaction is a bite. Once you react impulsively, you are no longer deciding the direction of the conversation. You are being pulled wherever the other person wants you to go. This is why emotionally intelligent people appear almost impossible to manipulate. They create space between stimulus and response. In that brief pause, they regain ownership of themselves. Modern psychology describes this as emotional regulation. Machiavelli described it through strategy. The language may be different, but the principle remains exactly the same. Whoever governs themselves becomes difficult for others to govern. Picture a seasoned hunter moving through a dense forest at dawn. If he crashes through every branch, snaps every twig beneath his feet, and startles every bird into flight, every animal knows exactly where he is, long before he ever sees them. His impatience becomes his greatest weakness. But the hunter who moves carefully, who studies the wind, who listens before taking another step, begins noticing things invisible to everyone else. He sees movement where others see only trees. He understands the rhythm of the forest because he has become part of its silence. Human interaction follows the same pattern. The loud person announces every intention. The reactive person exposes every weakness. But the calm observer quietly gathers information that everyone else unknowingly gives away. This leads directly to the first dark psychology trick. When someone attempts to provoke you, Deny them the reaction they expected. Do not rush to defend yourself. Do not hurry to prove them wrong. Let the silence remain between you. That silence often becomes unbearable, but not for you. It becomes unbearable for the person who expected to control your emotions. Most manipulators rely on predictable behavior. They expect anger to meet anger. They expect accusations to produce explanations. They expect pressure to force decisions. When none of those things happen, uncertainty begins working against them instead. They wonder whether their strategy failed. They question their own assumptions. Very often, they begin talking more than they intended. In their attempt to fill the uncomfortable silence, they reveal motives, frustrations, and insecurities that they had carefully hidden only moments before. What looked like passivity becomes quiet control. There is another reason silence unsettles people. It forces them to confront their own thoughts. Most conversations are filled with noise because human beings are uncomfortable with empty space. Silence creates uncertainty, and uncertainty encourages imagination. People begin interpreting your calm in ways you never could have achieved through words alone. Some assume confidence. Others assume hidden knowledge. Some even begin doubting themselves. This is not because silence possesses magical power. It is because the human mind naturally fills empty spaces with its own assumptions. The less you reveal unnecessarily, the more carefully people observe everything you do reveal. Your words become scarce, and scarcity creates value. Every sentence carries more weight simply because it is not wasted. Now consider the second trick, one that is even more difficult because it challenges one of the deepest human desires, the need to be understood. Never explain yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. At first, this advice sounds cold or even unfair. Surely misunderstandings should be corrected. Surely honesty deserves an opportunity to speak. And in healthy relationships built upon mutual respect, that is absolutely true. But Machiavelli was not writing about ideal relationships. He was studying power, ambition, and the realities of human behavior. He understood that some people do not ask questions because they seek answers. They ask questions because they seek leverage. Their goal is not clarity. Their goal is access to your emotions. Imagine standing before a judge who has already decided the verdict before the trial begins. Would presenting more evidence change his mind? Probably not. It would simply prolong the process while exhausting your own energy. The same principle exists in everyday life. Some critics have already reached their conclusions before you ever speak. No explanation satisfies them, because satisfaction was never their objective. Every answer becomes another opportunity to challenge you. Every clarification becomes another accusation. The conversation never ends because it was never designed to end. It was designed to keep you defending yourself indefinitely. This is one of the oldest traps in human psychology. The more you explain, the more people assume an explanation was necessary. Imagine two employees accused of making the same mistake. One delivers a 20-minute emotional defense, recounting every detail, every reason, every excuse. The other calmly says, "My work will speak for itself," and returns to his responsibilities. Weeks later, whose confidence is remembered? The first employee may have offered more facts, but the second displayed something much rarer, certainty. Human beings instinctively associate certainty with competence. They may not even realize they are doing it, but perception often outweighs explanation. This does not mean refusing responsibility when you are genuinely wrong. Wisdom requires humility, and accountability remains one of the strongest forms of character. The lesson is different. It is about recognizing the difference between sincere dialogue and emotional traps. If someone truly wants understanding, they listen as much as they speak. If someone only wants control, no amount of explanation will ever satisfy them. In those moments, your greatest strength is not finding better words. It is refusing to surrender your peace in exchange for someone else's approval. Machiavelli observed that influence belongs to those who understand human nature better than human emotion. Every unnecessary explanation weakens your position because it shifts your focus away from your actions and toward defending your image. Yet history consistently rewards those whose actions become their loudest argument. The strongest leaders were not remembered because they answered every critic. They were remembered because they continued building, leading, and acting, while others remained distracted by endless debates. The same principle applies today. Your consistency will always persuade more deeply than your excuses. Your composure will always outlast someone else's outrage. And once you understand that silence is not avoidance but deliberate control, you begin to see why Machiavelli considered emotional discipline one of the foundations of lasting power. In the next part, we will uncover the third and fourth dark psychology tricks, lessons that reveal why patience unsettles manipulators and how strategic distance can become one of the most powerful tools in protecting your influence. Patience is one of the rarest forms of strength because it demands that you resist the temptation of immediate reward. Most people believe power comes from acting quickly, speaking first, and forcing situations to move according to their own timeline. Machiavelli observed something very different. He understood that the impatient person is often the easiest person to control. Why? Because once someone knows what you desperately want and how quickly you want it, they no longer need to overpower you, they simply need to delay you. The impatient mind begins making emotional decisions. It accepts bad deals simply to end uncertainty. It reveals information simply to speed up the process. It compromises principles simply because waiting feels unbearable. The manipulator knows this. They understand that time itself can become a weapon. This is why the third dark psychology trick is simple, but incredibly difficult to master. Never allow urgency to make your decisions for you. Imagine two merchants negotiating the purchase of a valuable estate. One desperately needs the property before sunset. The other can wait another month without concern. Which one holds the stronger position? Most people would focus on money, contracts, or persuasion, but the real advantage belongs to the person who is willing to walk away. Patience creates freedom, and freedom creates leverage. The merchant who is emotionally attached to the outcome begins making concessions. He lowers his standards, increases his offer, and ignores warning signs, simply because he fears losing the opportunity. The patient merchant observes every reaction. He notices hesitation. He studies facial expressions. He listens carefully to every unnecessary word. Eventually, the seller begins negotiating against himself, lowering his own demands, because silence has become uncomfortable. The patient man never forced the situation. He simply refused to let urgency become his master. This principle extends far beyond business. Think about personal relationships. Someone stops replying to your messages. Immediately, your mind begins creating stories. Perhaps they are angry. Perhaps they have lost interest. Perhaps you have done something wrong. Anxiety urges you to send another message, then another, explaining yourself, apologizing for things that may never have happened. But what if nothing was actually wrong? What if your fear created the very problem you hoped to avoid? Emotional impatience often manufactures unnecessary suffering. Manipulators understand this perfectly. They know that silence, delayed responses, and uncertainty make emotionally reactive people reveal far more than they intended. The person desperate for reassurance begins chasing approval, while the patient person quietly waits for reality to reveal itself. Time often answers questions that panic can never solve. Think once more of the hunter moving through a dense forest. If he hears the faint crack of a branch in the distance and immediately runs toward the sound, he risks frightening away every animal nearby. But the experienced hunter waits. He studies the wind. He observes the birds. He notices which direction the leaves move. He understands that rushing toward every signal often leads farther away from the true target. Human behavior follows the same pattern. Not every opportunity deserves immediate action. Not every conflict deserves immediate resolution. Sometimes the greatest advantage belongs to the person who allows events to unfold naturally, while everyone else exhausts themselves reacting. History repeatedly rewards those who understood timing better than speed. Great commanders rarely attacked simply because they possessed an army. They waited until the conditions favored them. Wise rulers did not respond to every insult delivered by rival kingdoms. They recognized that emotional retaliation often served their enemies more than themselves. The same lesson applies in everyday life. Every time someone pressures you by saying, decide now, answer immediately, or this is your last chance. Pause before you respond. Genuine opportunities rarely disappear within minutes. Manufactured urgency is one of the oldest tools of manipulation. The person trying to rush your decision usually benefits more from your speed than you do. This leads naturally to the fourth dark psychology trick: become difficult to read. Human beings constantly search for patterns because patterns create predictability. The more predictable you become, the easier it is for others to anticipate your reactions, influence your choices, and shape your expectations. If everyone knows exactly what will make you angry, they possess a button they can press whenever they choose. If everyone knows what flatters you, they know exactly how to gain your trust. If everyone knows your fears, they know precisely where to apply pressure. Predictability may feel comfortable, but it quietly transfers power into someone else's hands. Imagine an experienced chess master sitting across from a beginner. The beginner plays every move according to obvious emotion. When threatened, he panics. When excited, he attacks recklessly. After only a few moves, the master understands exactly how his opponent thinks. The game is effectively over before it truly begins. But now imagine facing someone whose decisions remain calm, measured, and impossible to predict. Every move appears deliberate. Every expression remains composed. Every pause carries purpose. Suddenly the game changes. Instead of reading them, you begin questioning yourself. Instead of controlling the rhythm, you begin reacting to theirs. Mystery becomes a strategic advantage. Machiavelli understood that influence often belongs to the person who reveals the least while observing the most. This does not mean becoming dishonest or pretending to be someone you are not. It means developing emotional discipline so that your face, your words, and your behavior are no longer controlled by every passing emotion. Picture a deep lake on a calm morning. From the surface, it appears peaceful and still, yet beneath the water exists extraordinary depth and movement invisible to the eye. Compare that to a shallow stream that splashes loudly over every small stone. Which one appears more powerful? Which one inspires greater respect? Human character works in much the same way. Depth rarely advertises itself. Many people sabotage themselves by speaking before they think. They reveal every ambition during the first conversation. They announce every future plan before taking the first step. They celebrate victories before they have actually secured them. Then they wonder why obstacles suddenly appear. Human nature contains a strange tendency. Some people become inspired by your success, while others become quietly threatened by it. The more you reveal prematurely, the more opportunities you create for unnecessary criticism, jealousy, interference, or doubt. The wise understand that seeds grow strongest beneath the soil before they ever break through the surface. A tree does not announce its growth every day. It simply continues growing until everyone notices it, without needing an explanation. Being difficult to read also protects your emotional energy. If someone cannot easily determine whether they have offended you, manipulated you, or influenced you, they lose confidence in their strategy. They begin second-guessing themselves. The psychological advantage slowly shifts in your direction. This is not about intimidating others. It is about refusing to surrender your inner world to anyone who has not earned access to it. Confidence is not loud. Confidence is often remarkably quiet, because it no longer depends on constant validation. Machiavelli believed that the strongest leaders were not those who displayed every emotion openly, but those who understood which emotions to reveal, which to restrain, and when each served a greater purpose. Emotional transparency without wisdom is vulnerability. Emotional discipline guided by purpose becomes influence. Once you master patience and become less predictable, you stop living according to other people's expectations and begin living according to your own principles. That is the moment your presence changes. People may not immediately understand why, but they begin sensing something different. They realize they can no longer pull your emotional strings, rush your decisions, or predict your next move. And when that realization settles into their minds, they begin treating you differently, not because you demanded respect, but because your discipline quietly earned it. The fifth dark psychology trick is perhaps the most misunderstood because it appears, on the surface, to be nothing more than indifference. In reality, it is something far more disciplined. It is the ability to withdraw your attention from people who seek to control it. Human attention is one of the most valuable resources you possess, yet most people give it away without realizing its worth. Every argument, every unnecessary debate, every attempt to prove yourself to strangers slowly drains your energy while giving someone else exactly what they wanted. Machiavelli understood that attention is a form of power. Wherever your attention goes, your emotional energy follows, and whoever consistently controls your attention gradually begins controlling your life. This is why the fifth trick is simple. Never reward manipulation with attention. Imagine a fire burning in the middle of a village square. The more wood people throw into it, the larger it becomes. But eventually someone decides to stop feeding the flames. At first, the fire continues burning with the fuel it already possesses. Then, little by little, it weakens. The flames shrink. The heat disappears. Finally, nothing remains except cold ashes. Human conflict often follows the same pattern. Many manipulators survive on emotional reactions. They provoke arguments because arguments keep them relevant. They spread rumors because rumors force people to defend themselves. They criticize because criticism keeps your attention fixed upon them instead of your own purpose. Every angry reply is another piece of wood placed onto their fire. But when you quietly refuse to participate, something remarkable happens. Their influence begins fading, not because they suddenly changed, but because you stopped feeding the behavior that gave them power in the first place. This is one of the hardest lessons to accept, because the human mind naturally seeks justice. We want every false accusation corrected. We want every disrespectful comment answered. We want every misunderstanding resolved immediately. Yet life rarely works that way. Some battles can only be won by refusing to enter them. Think about a person shouting insults across a busy street. If no one stops to argue, eventually the shouting becomes meaningless. The crowd continues walking. The attention disappears. The person is left speaking only to themselves. The same principle applies in your personal and professional life. Not every invitation to conflict deserves your acceptance. Sometimes silence is not surrender. Sometimes silence is refusal. It is the quiet declaration that your peace is too valuable to be traded for someone else's chaos. Consider the lion on the African savanna. It does not chase every animal that runs across the grasslands. If it did, it would exhaust itself long before finding real opportunity. Instead, it watches, it waits, it conserves energy. Every movement has purpose. Every action serves survival. Human beings often do the opposite. They chase every criticism, every insult, every online comment, every attempt to provoke them. By the end of the day, they are emotionally exhausted, not because life was difficult, but because they gave their attention to everything except what truly mattered. Machiavelli would likely argue that wisdom is not measured by how many battles you win. It is measured by how wisely you choose your battles in the first place. There is another reason withdrawing attention is so effective. Manipulators often expect resistance. They prepare for arguments. They rehearse counterpoints. They anticipate your anger. What they rarely prepare for is complete emotional absence. Nothing unsettles someone seeking control more than realizing they no longer possess your attention. Suddenly their words lose weight. Their insults lose direction. Their strategy begins collapsing because it depended entirely upon your participation. This is not revenge. It is emotional independence. You stop allowing another person's behavior to determine your emotional state. Now we arrive at the sixth trick, and this one requires even greater discipline. Protect your intentions until your actions speak louder than your plans. One of the most common mistakes people make is announcing every dream before taking the first meaningful step toward achieving it. They tell everyone about the business they will build, the book they will write, the promotion they expect, the goals they intend to accomplish. At first, this feels exciting because praise arrives immediately. Friends encourage them, family applauds them, social media rewards them with attention, but something unexpected begins happening. The excitement of talking slowly replaces the discipline of doing. The satisfaction of announcing the goal tricks the brain into feeling as though progress has already been made. Meanwhile, the real work remains unfinished. Machiavelli understood that unfinished plans are fragile. The moment they become public, they become vulnerable to doubt, jealousy, criticism, and interference. Imagine planting a young tree. During its earliest days, the roots are shallow. A single strong storm can uproot it completely. But after years of quiet growth beneath the soil, that same tree withstands winds that would have destroyed it before. Your ambitions deserve the same protection. Before they become strong enough to survive criticism, they should be allowed to grow in silence. Every unnecessary announcement exposes them before they are ready. Picture an architect designing a magnificent cathedral. He does not gather the entire city each morning to describe every brick he plans to place that day. Instead, he works patiently. Day after day, the structure rises quietly. Months later, people begin noticing its size. Years later, they admire its beauty. Decades later, they forget the speeches entirely, because the building itself has become the only evidence that matters. Your life works the same way. Results persuade more deeply than promises ever will. There is another hidden danger in revealing your plans too early. Human nature is complex. Some people genuinely celebrate your ambitions. Others compare them to their own lives, and quietly become uncomfortable. They may never openly oppose you, but their doubt begins influencing your confidence. A casual remark, a sarcastic joke, a dismissive smile. These small moments accumulate until your certainty begins weakening. None of this would have happened if your vision had remained protected until it became reality. This is why many of history's greatest achievements seem to appear suddenly. They did not truly appear overnight. They simply grew in silence while everyone else was distracted. Think once again of the hunter entering the forest before dawn. He does not announce his destination to every traveler he meets along the road. He does not shout through the trees to warn the deer of his arrival. His success depends partly upon remaining unseen until the moment of action. Human goals often require the same discipline. The less unnecessary attention they receive, the more freedom they have to develop without interference. Modern culture encourages constant broadcasting. People document every beginning, but often disappear before reaching the ending. Machiavelli would likely smile at this contradiction. He knew that power does not grow through constant announcement. It grows through quiet consistency. The person who surprises the world with completed work will always leave a deeper impression than the person who repeatedly promises future greatness. When you combine these two lessons, something remarkable begins happening. You stop wasting your attention on people determined to distract you, and you stop exposing your future to people who have not earned the right to influence it. Your energy becomes focused instead of scattered. Your confidence becomes internal instead of dependent upon applause, and slowly, almost without noticing, your life begins speaking for itself. The people around you start asking a different kind of question. They no longer wonder what you are going to do. They begin wondering how you managed to accomplish so much without anyone seeing it happen. That quiet transformation is exactly what Machiavelli understood. Real influence is rarely announced. It is discovered only after disciplined action has already changed the course of events. The seventh and final trick is the one that ties all the others together, because without it, every lesson you've learned becomes temporary. It is this: become emotionally independent. Most people spend their lives believing that freedom comes from money, status, or influence. Machiavelli understood that the greatest form of freedom is much quieter than that. It is reaching the point where your peace no longer depends on another person's approval, your confidence no longer depends on another person's praise, and your direction no longer changes because someone disapproves of your path. This is the highest form of psychological strength because once people lose the ability to control your emotions, they lose one of the most effective ways of controlling your decisions. Think about how much of the average person's life is shaped by invisible expectations. They dress a certain way because they fear judgment. They remain silent when they should speak because they fear rejection. They speak when they should remain silent because they fear being misunderstood. They accept disrespect because they fear loneliness. They explain themselves because they fear being disliked. Every one of these fears quietly hands control of their life to someone else. They wake each morning believing they are making their own choices, when in reality, they are responding to invisible emotional pressure from the people around them. The prison has no walls, yet millions remain trapped inside it. Imagine a marionette suspended by dozens of strings. Each string represents another person's opinion, another criticism, another compliment, another expectation. Every time someone pulls one of those strings, the puppet moves without choosing to move. Now imagine those strings being cut one by one. At first, the puppet falls because it has forgotten how to stand on its own, but eventually it rises under its own strength for the very first time. That is emotional independence. It is not becoming cold. It is not refusing love, friendship, or meaningful relationships. It is learning that your identity cannot be built upon the unstable foundation of other people's reactions. Approval can disappear overnight. Reputation can change in a single rumor. Popularity rises and falls like the tide. But character, once deliberately cultivated, remains yours regardless of what the world decides to think. This is why Machiavelli repeatedly emphasized self-mastery over public image. Public opinion is one of the most unpredictable forces in human history. The crowd that praises you today may criticize you tomorrow for the very same actions. If your emotional stability depends upon applause, then criticism will destroy your peace. But if your stability is rooted in principle rather than popularity, both praise and criticism lose much of their power over you. You begin acting because something is right, not because it is rewarded. You stop chasing validation and start pursuing excellence. Ironically, that is often when genuine respect begins arriving naturally. Consider an ancient oak tree standing alone in the middle of an open field. Throughout the seasons, it faces scorching summers, violent storms, relentless winds, and freezing winters. Birds come and go. Travelers rest beneath its branches before continuing their journey. Children climb its trunk. Some people admire its beauty, while others carve their names into its bark. Yet the tree remains exactly what it was created to be. It does not grow taller because someone praises it. It does not stop growing because someone insults it. Its roots reach deep beneath the earth, where the storms cannot touch them. Human character should be built the same way. The deeper your values are rooted within yourself, the less the changing weather of public opinion can shake you. There comes a moment in every person's life when they realize they cannot convince everyone. No matter how honest you are, someone will question your motives. No matter how generous you become, someone will call you selfish. No matter how carefully you explain yourself, someone will deliberately misunderstand you. At first, this realization feels discouraging, but eventually, it becomes one of the most liberating truths you will ever discover. The day you stop trying to control what everyone thinks is the day you finally regain control of yourself. You begin investing your energy where it actually produces results. Your habits, your discipline, your integrity, your work, and your purpose. Look back at the 7 lessons you've learned. Never react immediately. Never explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. Never allow urgency to replace wisdom. Never become so predictable that others can manipulate your emotions. Never reward manipulation with your attention. Never expose your plans before your actions are ready to speak for themselves. And above all, never surrender your emotional independence for temporary approval. Individually, these lessons are powerful. Together, they become a philosophy of life. They transform the way you respond to conflict, success, criticism, relationships, and even your own thoughts. They teach you that real power is not loud, dramatic, or constantly visible. More often, it is quiet, it is disciplined, it is almost invisible to those who only recognize strength when it announces itself. Perhaps that is why truly wise people often seem ordinary. They do not need to prove they are intelligent. They do not chase every argument. They do not compete for attention. They conserve their energy for what genuinely matters. While others are busy winning debates, they are building lives. While others are defending their image, they are strengthening their character. While others are reacting to every distraction, they are moving steadily toward their purpose. Years later, the difference becomes impossible to ignore. The loud voices have faded into memory, but the disciplined person continues advancing because they spent their life mastering themselves instead of mastering appearances. As you leave this lesson, ask yourself one question. How many of your recent decisions were truly yours, and how many were emotional reactions to someone else's words, opinions, or expectations? That single question has the power to change the way you live. Because every time you choose patience instead of impulse, silence instead of unnecessary explanation, discipline instead of emotional chaos, you reclaim another piece of your freedom. That is the quiet victory Machiavelli understood centuries ago. The greatest conquest is not over another person. It is over the parts of yourself that once made you easy to manipulate. If this lesson challenged the way you think, then you're exactly where you belong. Here on Dark Philosophy, we don't just explore history, we uncover the timeless psychological strategies hidden within it. Every week, we dive into the ideas of Machiavelli, Marcus Aurelius, Nietzsche, Sun Tzu, and other great thinkers to help you develop stronger discipline, deeper awareness, and a mind that cannot be easily controlled. If you found value in this video, subscribe to Dark Philosophy, turn on notifications, and join a growing community committed to mastering not only the world around them, but the world within. And before you go, tell us in the comments, which of Machiavelli's 7 lessons challenged you the most, and which one will you start applying today? Until next time, remember this: the loudest person may win the moment, but the person who masters themselves often wins a lifetime.